And joining me now to discuss this further are Dr. Doug Parr, who's Chief Scientist at Greenpeace, and Tom Burke, who's a former government energy advisor and chairman of the environmental think tank E3G. Good to have you both with us here on BBC News. Doug, if I can begin with you, if we don't have Hinkley, what else do we have to try to make our future energy requirements secure?
Well, we've got a suite of options, actually, ways of delivering low-carbon power that are quite often going to be cheaper than Hinkley, certainly by the time it's operating, if it ever is. So that includes solar, which is now coming down in price and already can be just about done without subsidy. There's onshore wind is cheap. Offshore wind, there's a recent bid won in the Netherlands, which would significantly undercut Hinkley, as well as other options like tidal and hydro and so on. And you sort of bundle those together, and you can get a low carbon system. So we meet our international obligations on climate change, which we must, and we keep the lights on 24/7.
You're talking about bundling things together, but you know, you're having to bundle quite a lot of things together rather than just this one option of Hinkley, aren't you? And we saw Siemens, for example, recently saying it was putting new wind power investment plans in the UK on hold because of uncertainty over Brexit. So do you think that this pause that we're hearing about from the government over Hinkley is just that, and that actually it will go ahead?
Well, I think we'll have to wait and see. It was certainly a very last-minute decision, and it was a very huge political choice that they made to sort of stop at the last minute when people had gathered to celebrate. In effect, it was like saying the party's cancelled. So there's obviously some concern inside government. But the thing is that this has been attracting criticism, this project, quite widely over the costs, the commitments. There are things like nuclear waste that are not sorted out. There are security concerns, as we've been hearing. And actually, if you look at the alternative options, the suite of options, the cutting-edge technologies that are now coming down in price all the time where nuclear isn't, then actually you can deliver it because these things are delivering already, both in the UK and abroad. Let
me bring you in now, Tom, former energy advisor to Gordon Brown. Last Sunday in China, Philip Hammond said this was going ahead.
I wasn't an advisor to Gordon Brown. That's Nick Butler.
I do beg your pardon. I've got that. Right. I've got that. I've been misinformed. A former government energy advisor. I think that is accurate. Philip Hammond said on Sunday in China that this was going ahead. Today, we hear this from the government. What's your insight into what might be going on here? Is this simply about, and I say simply with inverted commas, Theresa May, her style and her wanting to dot the I's and cross the T's on this?
I find that a very unlikely explanation. What is Mrs May going to know in September that she doesn't know now? I mean, there won't be anybody to talk to in France, but do you see what I mean? I mean, nothing is going to change between now and September. So I'm finding it extremely difficult to think what could have caused such a massive dislocation, not just to our relations with other countries, and as we've heard, they're all going to be upset, but also to Mrs May's own programme of persuading us in this country that the economy was safe and secure, that we really were still attractive to inward investment. This was the highlight of that sort of pre-summer reassurance strategy, and that's gone out the window.
So if it's not that, if it's not about her style and wanting to check the details, what is it about, in your opinion?
I wish I knew, actually, but what I do know from my own experience inside government is nothing done Mrs May was abroad when this decision to pull the plug was taken. Nothing is done normally, like with the Prime Minister abroad, on this scale, without there being some new factor, something new and big that nobody knows about.
Do you think it's to do with the unease that is being expressed on the EDF board itself?
I think that may be part of it. I think it may be concern about the actual state of the investigations by the French nuclear regulator and also by the French Financial Markets Authority into different aspects of problems at EDF. Remember, what we would have signed today, if it had gone ahead, would have been a legally binding contract that would have committed us for 35 years. So it's a big deal.
Doug, what are your thoughts on what you think might happen next? I know I'm asking you to second guess in a situation where we don't have all the facts, we don't have all the details behind what was going into the thinking on these decisions.
Well, my expectation is that certainly from outside the kind of Whitehall bubble, which we can't see into properly yet, there will be an expectation that this whole deal will be examined again from the point of view of what's the security issues, what are the delivery issues, and what are the cost issues when you compare to the other options for decarbonisation, which are so much better than they were when this entire programme of new nuclear was kicked off by Tony Blair 10 years ago. At the time, it looked like, you know, if you want to decarbonise and you want to do it in the way that the government is still trying, there were no other options. Now there are actually quite a lot of other options available, and you don't have to go down the route of having other potentially unfriendly and worrisome governments engaged in critical UK infrastructure.
That said, do you think that this project is simply too big to be allowed to fail, as we've heard various commentators and interested parties say?
Well, I think if Theresa May does what she said on the steps of Downing Street and takes the interests of everybody in Britain into account, the fact that this is going to be difficult, awkward, embarrassing and so on for other governments in the world and the relationships shouldn't stop her being able to say, actually, there's a better deal for Britain. She is, after all, the British Prime Minister and not simply someone who's looking after the interests of French state companies and the Chinese.
A brief thought from you?
Well, in a way, she's taken the political hit for abandoning the project now. So in a sense, the political imperative, which was there, very strongly there, to get on with it, even at the expense of having a white elephant, to some extent, she's taken the hit for that. So I agree with Doug. The pressure now to really re-examine, and that's never been done, by the way, the assumptions under which this project has been brought forward have never been subject to any kind of decent forensic examination. I think the pressure for that will now become very, very strong.
OK, Tom, thank you very much for that. Tom Burke, former energy advisor to government, and Doug Parr, chief scientist at Greenpeace. Thank you both very much indeed.